The coldest place on Earth doesn't forgive. At minus 96 degrees, even silence freezes. Out here, the wind doesn't howl. It whispers. And what it says is, turn back. But one man stayed. He always stayed. His name was Dmitri. He had lived here for 31 years alone, for the last 7. Every morning began the same way, listening to the fire, listening to the wind, deciding which one was louder. That morning, the wind won. He pulled on his parka, tightened his hood, opened the door, and the cold hit him like a wall. At this temperature, exposed skin freezes in under 2 minutes. Your eyelashes stick together. Your lungs burn with every breath. He walked toward the woodpile, 40 steps he could make with his eyes closed. But halfway there, he stopped. Something was wrong. A sound, faint, almost swallowed by the wind. A low, broken cry. He turned toward the tree line, and there, half buried in the snow, he saw it. A reindeer, young, collapsed, barely breathing. It looked at him, one dark eye, barely open, not afraid. Too tired to be afraid. Dmitri knelt beside it, pulled off his glove, pressed his bare hand to its neck. Still warm, still alive, but barely. He didn't think about it, didn't weigh the cost. He just stood up and went to get the sled. At 96 below, carrying anything is a risk. Carrying a dying reindeer is something else entirely. He dragged the sled through the snow. Every step was a negotiation with the cold. When he reached her, she hadn't moved. Her eye found him again, and this time, something shifted. Not trust, not yet, but something close to it. He worked his arms beneath her. She was lighter than she should have been, nothing but bone and breath. He lifted her onto the sled. She let out a low sound, not pain exactly, something older, like surrender. 40 steps out, 40 steps back. But now, pulling 80 kilos through a blizzard, every step was a war. Halfway back, he stopped, bent double. His lungs burned. The cold had teeth. He looked back at her. She was watching him. That was enough. He picked up the rope and pulled. He reached the cabin door, kicked the snow clear, and for the first time in 7 years, he carried something living across that threshold. He laid her down near the stove, gently. The way you set down something precious and breakable. The stove hissed. The wind screamed outside. Between those two sounds, the reindeer's shallow breathing. He pulled the door shut, bolted it, and for a moment, stood with his back against it, eyes closed. He opened them again, looked at the reindeer.
It's all right.
She was looking at him. Two strangers,
Be still.
one room, one fire between them. He moved slowly. Animals read urgency as threat. He'd learned that a long time ago. He brought water first, melted snow in a tin pot on the stove, cooled it with his breath. He knelt beside her, tilted the pot. Water touched her lips and she drank, weakly, but she drank. Then the wound. He'd seen injuries like this before, a fall on ice, maybe, or something with claws. He cleaned it with warm water, pressed dried moss into the cut the old way, the only way out here. He wrapped the leg with a strip of old cloth, tied it firm but not tight. She watched every movement. He sat back on his heels, looked at her. There, he said, the first word spoken in that cabin in months. Outside, the temperature kept falling. The storm wasn't finished. It was only beginning. Dmitri had come to this place when he was 27, young, strong, full of ideas about what a life should be. He built this cabin with Anya, board by board, nail by nail. She chose the spot near the river, facing east, so the morning light would come through the window first. She was the one who taught him patience with animals. They know what you feel, she used to say. So feel something worth knowing. She got sick in the winter of his 51st year, a fever that came fast and wouldn't break. The nearest doctor was 90 kilometers away. The snow that year was the worst in decades. No one could come. No one came. After she was gone, he thought about leaving. Every spring, he thought about it. Every spring, he stayed. This was their place. Leaving would be the second loss. So, the years passed, one by one. Each winter, a little quieter than the last. He had his routine. Wake before the sun, not that the sun meant much here in deep winter. 3 hours of light, sometimes less. First, the fire. Always the fire. Without it, nothing else matters. Second, water. He'd fill the pot with snow from the drift beside the door. It took 20 minutes to melt enough for 1 cup. But that morning he filled 2 cups. One for himself, one for her. She was awake when he turned. Her eyes followed him across the cabin, not with fear anymore, with curiosity. He brought the cup to her, knelt, held it steady. She drank on her own this time, longer, deeper. Third in the routine, food, dried fish, salted meat, hard bread that had to be soaked before eating. He rationed everything. But a reindeer can't eat dried fish. He crumbled the last of his grain into a shallow bowl and set it beside her. She sniffed it, hesitated, then ate slowly, carefully, the way the starving always eat, as if the food might disappear. Outside, the wind changed direction. When the wind shifts in Yakutia, it means the storm is settling in. It means it's not leaving. He checked the woodpile, counted the logs. Enough for 4 days, maybe 5, if he let the cabin cool between feedings. 5 days, and the storm showed no sign of stopping. He sat at the table that evening, ate his dried fish in silence, then looked across at the empty chair and the reindeer sleeping beyond it. Before he slept, he added a log to the fire, pulled a blanket over the reindeer, and for the first time in 7 years, said goodnight to someone. The second day, the storm hadn't stopped. If anything, it was louder. Inside, the reindeer tried to stand. Her front legs pushed, her rear buckled. She collapsed back onto the pelts. Dmitri didn't help her, not yet. An animal has to want to stand on its own. Helping too soon teaches them not to try. He changed her bandage instead. The wound was better, the bleeding had stopped, the moss had done its work. She didn't flinch this time, not once. She trusted his hands. That afternoon, he talked to her, not about anything in particular, just the sound of a voice filling the empty space. He told her about the river in summer, how the water runs clear over the stones and the fish flash silver in the current. He told her about Anya, how she could name every bird by its song, how she laughed in a way that made the cold feel smaller. The reindeer shifted closer, just slightly. Her muzzle came to rest against his knee. He didn't move, didn't pull away. He just let her stay there. And in that silence, something between them changed quietly, the way ice melts from the inside.
It is
Day
colder.
3. He woke to a cabin that felt different, colder.
The
fire had eaten through the night's wood faster than he'd planned. He counted the remaining logs, 12. At 3 logs a day, that was 4 days. But the cold was getting worse, and 4 days was optimistic. The main woodpile was outside, under the lean-to, 30 meters from the door. In this storm, 30 meters was a journey. He fed the stove 2 of the 12 logs. The fire roared back to life. The reindeer lifted her head at the sound the crackle meant warmth, and she'd learned that already. He boiled water, fed her first, then ate his own meal, smaller now. He'd started rationing without deciding to. The grain was running low. The dried fish would last another week if he was careful. But being careful and being warm were starting to become 2 different things. That afternoon, the reindeer tried to stand again. This time, her front legs held. Her rear legs trembled, but they held too. For 3 seconds, she stood. 3 seconds. Dmitri smiled, a real smile, the kind he thought he'd forgotten. He knelt beside her, stroked the side of her neck. "Good girl," he said. "Good girl, Mila." Mila. It was Anya's word for dear one. He hadn't planned to use it. It just came. Day 4. 8 logs left. He couldn't wait any longer. He pulled on every layer he owned. 2 shirts, the wool vest, the parka, 2 pairs of gloves. He wrapped a scarf around his face until only his eyes showed. He tied a rope around his waist, anchored the other end to the doorframe. In a whiteout, 30 meters can become forever.
Keep warm,
He looked at Mila one last time.
I'll be back.
She was watching him. Her ears were flat. She knew something was wrong. He opened the door. The storm hit him like a living thing. White, screaming, absolute. He stepped into it. 1 step, 2. By the 3rd, the cabin was gone behind him. He couldn't see. He couldn't hear anything except wind. He followed the rope with one hand and his memory with the other. His lungs burned. Every breath was like swallowing glass. The cold didn't just surround him, it entered him. Then his hand hit wood, the lean-to. He'd made it. He loaded his arms. 5 logs, 6,
Hurry, Dmitri.
7,
It's almost
as
out.
many as he could carry without falling. Then he turned back toward the rope. The way back was worse. The wind was against him now. Every step was stolen from the storm. Inside the cabin, Mila had moved. For the first time, she'd dragged herself across the floor, toward the door, toward where he'd gone. She made a sound, low and sustained. Not quite a call, more like a question, sent into the wind. Then the door burst open. Snow and cold and a man carrying an armload of frozen logs crashed into the cabin. He slammed the door, dropped to his knees. The logs scattered across the floor. He couldn't feel his hands. Then he felt it, a muzzle against his cheek, cold and soft. Mila had dragged herself to him. He didn't move for a long time, just knelt there, her muzzle on his cheek, the fire crackling, the wind outside forgotten. He finally moved, slowly, gathered the logs, stacked them beside the stove. His hands were shaking, but they worked. They still worked. That night, the wind changed pitch.
Easy, little
lower, slower, as if the storm was taking a breath. Morning, day 5. He woke to something he hadn't heard in days, silence. He went to the window, scraped the frost with his fingernail, and through the small, clear circle light, actual, golden, winter light, he unbolted the door, pulled it open. The world had been rewritten in white. Behind him, Mila's head turned toward the light. Her nostrils flared. She smelled the open air, the sky, the snow, the world she came from. He stepped outside. The snow came up to his thighs. The air was so cold it tasted like metal, but the sky was endless. He stood there and breathed. Just breathed. The way you breathe when you realize you almost didn't. He brought more wood inside, filled the wall, cleared snow from the door, checked the lean-to. The lull wouldn't last, he could feel it in the sky. Inside, Mila ate the grain he offered. Then she tried to stand again. This time, she made it. 10 seconds, 20. Her legs held. Dmitri laughed. A short, surprised sound pulled from somewhere deep. The cabin hadn't heard laughter in 7 years. He gave her a name then, properly, out loud. Mila, he said. Your name is Mila. Outside, the northern sky darkened. The lull was over. The second wave was coming, and it would be worse. He bolted the door, fed the stove, checked the woodpile. 22 logs. It would have to be enough. The second storm hit at midday. The cabin shook. The walls groaned. Snow drove through cracks he didn't know existed. He stuffed the cracks with rags and moss, pressed pelts against the walls, but the cold was finding every weakness. The temperature inside the cabin
Keep warm,
dropped.
Mila.
He could see his breath.
Fire
now.
still breathes.
Mila's too. 2 clouds of warm air, struggling to exist. He moved his cot closer to the stove, pulled Mila's pelts closer too. The circle of warmth was shrinking, and they needed to be inside it. Da! He fed her more grain, ate less himself. The math was simple, and he didn't question it. That evening, the storm screamed louder than any night before. The stovepipe rattled. The chimney draft reversed, pushing smoke back into the cabin. He cracked the door open, just an inch, enough to let the smoke out and the cold in. A trade he had no choice but to make. He held the door for 10 minutes, until the smoke cleared, until his hand on the bolt was numb. Then he sealed it shut again. He sat down beside Mila. She pressed her body against his leg. Neither of them moved for the rest of the night. The fire burned low, and they let it. Sometime past midnight, the fire died. Not slowly, not with warning. The last log crumbled to ash, and the stove went dark. The darkness was total. The cold moved in instantly, not gradually, like something that had been waiting outside the circle of light, and now the circle was gone. Dmitri sat up on his cot. He could feel the temperature falling not by degrees, by the minute. He had no more logs inside. The woodpile outside was 30 meters of death away in a storm that hadn't stopped. There would be no second run tonight. He knew the math. Without fire, the cabin would reach outside temperature in 4 hours. At minus 96, that meant death. So he did the only thing left. He pulled every blanket, every pelt, every piece of cloth in the cabin to the floor beside Mila. He lay down beside
close,
her,
Mila.
pressed his body
Don't
against
worry,
hers,
we'll get through
pulled
this.
the layers over them both. Her warmth was the only fire left. She didn't pull away. She pressed closer. Her breathing slowed. Her body was a furnace he didn't deserve, but desperately needed. He knew he couldn't sleep. Sleep at this temperature without fire is a door you might not come back through. So he talked. He told her about spring, how the ice breaks on the river and the sound is like thunder, how the first green appears overnight, as if the earth was just pretending to be dead. He told her about the birds that come in May, wagtails, pipits, the cuckoo that Anya could imitate so well, the real ones answered her. He told her about the wildflowers, purple fireweed, Arctic poppies, how Anya wove them into crowns, and made him wear one while he chopped wood. Hours passed. The cold deepened. He could feel his body slowing, his thoughts thickening like honey in winter. He felt his eyes closing, the cold telling him to rest. The oldest lie in the world. Then Mila moved. She pushed her head beneath his arm and pressed her muzzle hard against his chest. A jolt of warm breath through his shirt, like a command. Stay. He gasped, pulled air into his lungs. His heart kicked back against his ribs. He was still here. He held her head against his chest and said her name over and over. Mila, 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 Mila. Each time a promise not to leave. He kept talking through the night. About everything. About nothing. His voice the only heat that didn't cost firewood. And then so faintly he almost missed it through the frosted window. A thin line of gold appeared on the horizon. Dawn! They had made it. He breathed out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. Mila's ear flicked toward him. She'd made it too. He moved slowly, his body stiff and aching, but alive. Everything hurt, and that meant he was alive. He found the last strip of birch bark in the cabin, a few shavings of kindling from the floor. Scraps, not enough to heat the cabin, but maybe enough to start a fire he could feed. He placed them in the stove, struck a match.
Come on.
His hands shook so badly it took 3 tries.
Not
Then the
again.
bark caught. A flame, small as a fingertip,
Finally.
but a flame. He fed it shavings, one at a time, nursing the flame, the way you nurse a heartbeat back, gently, desperately. He needed real wood. He pulled on his parka, opened the door to the morning, and waded to the lean-to in the clear, cold light. He carried the wood back in armloads. 3 trips, 4, until the cabin wall was stacked high again and the stove roared like it was angry it had ever gone out. And then, in the golden light of that restored cabin, Mila stood, not trembling, not swaying. She stood firm, all 4 legs beneath her, and looked at the door. She took a step, then another. Her hooves clicked on the wooden floor, the sound of recovery, measured in footfalls. She walked to the window, pressed her muzzle against the glass. Beyond the frost, the forest waited. Her forest. Dmitri saw it in her eyes, the same look he'd seen in every wild thing he'd ever nursed back to health, the look that meant, it's time. He didn't open the door that day. He told himself the snow was too deep, that she needed one more night of rest. But they both knew the truth. He fed her that night, more grain than she needed, a last meal, though he wouldn't call it that. He sat beside her one last time, stroked the fur behind her ear. She leaned into his hand, the way she always did. He didn't sleep that night either, not from cold this time, from knowing that mornings change things, and some mornings change everything. Morning came, clear and gold and absolute. The sky was the color of things that don't apologize. He dressed slowly, built the fire up high, boiled tea, ate his breakfast without tasting it. He removed the bandage from her leg one final time. The wound had healed. A scar, nothing more. She was ready. He stood, walked to the door. His hand rested on the bolt for a long time. He slid the bolt, pulled the door wide. The golden morning flooded in. He stepped aside, made a path, and looked at Mila. She looked at the door, then at him, then at the door again. She walked, slowly, across the cabin floor, past the stove that had warmed her, past the pelts where she'd healed, past the man who had given her his food, his fire, his voice. She stopped in front of him, lifted her head. Her muzzle found his cheek one more time, warm breath on cold skin. A goodbye, only they would understand. Then she stepped through the door, into the snow, into the sun, into the world that had almost taken her. She walked through the snow toward the tree line, strong, steady, each step more certain than the last. Then she stopped. At the edge of the trees, she stopped and turned. From the forest behind her, a sound, low calls, the sound of other reindeer, her herd. They had been waiting. Mila looked back
Go
at
on,
Dmitri
Mila.
one more
Go back
time.
to them. You are home.
One long, clear look across the snow. Then she turned and walked into the trees with the others. The herd moved through the trees. One by one, they disappeared into the white forest. Mila was the last to vanish. Dmitri stood in the doorway, watching the empty tree line, the sun on his face, the silence around him complete. He stood there a long time, until the cold reminded him that doors are for closing. He stepped back inside. The cabin was quiet, quieter than it had been in days. the kind of quiet that has a shape. He walked to where she'd been, knelt, pressed his hand into the hollow her body had left in the pelts, still warm. He picked up her bowl, held it for a moment, then placed it on the shelf beside his own mug. 2 vessels, one empty, one full. He looked at Anya's photograph, and for the first time, he didn't see only what he'd lost. He saw what she'd given him, the ability to care for something again. He sat at the table, drank his tea. The second chair was still empty, but the silence wasn't as heavy as before. That night, he slept deeply, the first real sleep in over a week. No wind, no watching, just rest. Morning, he opened his eyes to sunlight, not the gray light of storm days, real, golden reaching light, the kind that finds you through the window and says, "Get up. The world is still here." The days that followed were quiet, but a different kind of quiet, the kind that comes after something has been mended. Every morning now he opened the door before starting the fire, just to look, just to breathe the cold air and see the forest. He began leaving grain at the tree line, a small pile, pressed into the snow. He didn't know if she'd come back. He left it anyway. He poured the grain onto a flat stone at the edge of the forest, patted it down, then walked back without looking over his shoulder. Days passed. The grain was always gone by the next morning. Could have been birds, could have been mice. He chose to believe otherwise. He began carving in the evenings, a small piece of birchwood and a knife. He didn't plan what he was making. His hands just knew. A reindeer, of course, small enough to fit in his palm. He carved the broken antler last. That was how he'd always know it was her. He placed it on the shelf, beside the photograph, beside the bowl, a small wooden family, growing from what he'd survived. Winter held, the cold continued. But the days were getting longer now, a minute more light each morning, the earth slowly turning its face back toward the sun. He still left the grain each morning, still walked the path to the tree line. A ritual now, like prayer. Something you do not because it works, but because it means something.
Stop!
Then one morning, weeks after she'd gone, he reached the stone and
Look at
stopped.
that.
Tracks, reindeer tracks, fresh in the snow around the stone, and one set of prints smaller than the others, with a faint drag on the left rear hoof. He knelt, touched the tracks with his fingers, the edges still sharp. She'd been here, perhaps an hour ago, perhaps less. He smiled, not the surprised smile or the bittersweet one, a quiet smile, the kind that doesn't need an audience. He poured the grain onto the stone, more than usual, pressed it down with both hands, a feast for whoever came. He stood, looked into the forest one more time. Somewhere in there, between the frozen trees, she was alive. That was enough. He walked back to the cabin, the same path, the same steps. But the man walking it was not the same man who had walked it before. He paused at the door, looked back once more. The tree line stood in the golden light, patient and full of secrets. He smiled again, then went inside. The fire crackled. The tea steamed. Outside, the cold remained. But cold is only a temperature. What you do in it, that's what matters. Some people think survival is about endurance, about outlasting the cold. But Dmitri knew better. Survival is about what you refuse to let freeze. He saved her life. She saved his. And somewhere in the frozen forest, a reindeer with a broken antler walks through the snow, carrying a piece of someone's heart between her ribs. At minus 96 degrees, everything freezes. The rivers, the trees, the air itself, but not everything, not the parts that matter.